Okay, BYP, out playing with the birdies, video 7, which I'd lost on this mythical topic of grounding antenna systems for lightning. There is no such thing. Grounding that vertical turns into a lightning rod, because what those charges up in the clouds are looking for is ideally the sharp top of that antenna that's grounded, so charges from the ground can travel up to that sharp point. It is a complete contradiction in terms to ground an antenna for lightning. Since it can't be done, here's what I did. I didn't come up with this. Paul, WA0 BAG, told me about it. He dealt with lightning discharges in the mountains in Colorado. He did it for real, and where it was really dangerous. He told me about running a feed line through a piece of pipe. Lightning transient hit the system. Say it took the piece of pipe, opened it up, and little copper BBs fell out. It completely disintegrated the line. So what I've done here is run transmission lines, most of them, through 10 feet segments of galvanized steel conduit. Steel has an extremely high permeability. It's essentially extremely lossy. So I run those through 10 feet of that conduit. It's hidden behind that green fascia, but here's the other end of one of them. I measured between the LMR 400 shield and the pipe. I measured about 70 picofarad per foot. So that implies 700 picofarad between the shield and the conduit. The conduit will act as a big, essentially a choke to the transient. So I grounded these ends of the conduit, not the transmission line, but the conduit, to a rod over here someplace with number 14 wires. So in theory, that's not directly grounding the transmission line. There won't be any AC leakage from the ham shack coming down and going to ground. There's no ground fault there, but it's some kind of protection. And since it's turned colder than a well digger's behind outside, it's down in the 20s, we got robbed. But to continue this idea of grounding, at the prompting of John, who mentions ham station grounding, what you need to understand about grounding is there's no such thing as grounding ham equipment. It doesn't exist. And the fantasy there is that we need separate ground rods for grounding separate things, and that's completely contrary to code. What ground rods are for is for grounding the service entrance. And here's a service entrance to my house. It's the breaker box. Well, there's a cable in there, the bare one. It goes up to the weatherhead. There's a number 6 wire coming down to the ground rod. It's forbidden by code to put another ground rod over on the other end of the house and pretend that somehow that's a ground rod as part of this system, because they're too far apart to be bonded. In my installation, that would be 150 foot of wire, and have a low enough impedance to couple a lightning strike. It would have to be as big around as my arm. It's forbidden by code to do that. The purpose of multiple rods is not for the loads. We're forbidden under code to put ground rods to ground at the load. The purpose of multiple ground rods is not about lightning, it's about poor soil. We have real poor soil here in Tennessee. Multiple rods are for better grounding in soil that has poor conductivity. It's got nothing to do with radio equipment or lightning. It's an absolute fool's errand to pretend that we're going to ground something as lightning protection. That's completely contradictory. In other words, as protection to prevent a lightning strike, all grounding is going to do is encourage it. And it's important to realize that the ground rod for this box has nothing directly to do with the load. It's about that corresponding ground that's out 75 feet out to the pole, and coupling those two together. That has protective benefits for the incoming service system. It has nothing to do with the load. Okay, BYP.